This episode discusses themes of grief, loss, trauma, psychological distress, and the impact of unresolved pain. Listener discretion is advised. There is a moment where grief stops feeling like something you carry and starts feeling like something that carries you. It does not all happen at once. It does not arrive in a way that demands your attention. It happens slowly, quietly, in a way that slips beneath your awareness. A memory that lingers a little longer than it should. A thought that refuses to let go. A feeling that stays with you, unchanged, no matter how much time passes. And then, without warning, something shifts. Because grief does not always stay contained. Sometimes it spreads, moving through every part of you, reshaping the way you see the world, the way you understand it, the way you exist within it. And if that grief is deep enough, if it is tied to something you cannot replace, something you cannot accept losing, you stop asking how to move forward. You start asking something else. What if you didn't have to? What if the world could be something different, something quieter, something easier, something where the loss never happened, where the pain never took root, and where everything that was taken could simply exist again? Because when that question becomes real, when it stops being a distant thought and starts becoming something possible, something within reach, there is no clear line left to hold on to, no boundary that feels solid enough to stop you. This is not a story about power. This is a story about what happens when grief is given the ability to shape reality. This is Wanda Maximoff. This is Revenge and Madness, where we unravel that thin line between justice and insanity. Every story begins with a moment, a fracture, a loss, a decision that changed everything that comes after it. Some people fight against that moment. Some people try to move forward from it. And some people rewrite everything around it, bending the world itself to escape what they cannot accept. Today, we step into the story of Wanda Maximoff, a woman defined not just by what she lost, but by what she could not let go of. Because Wanda is not driven by vengeance. She is not chasing justice in the way others might. She is chasing something far more dangerous. A world where her pain no longer exists. And the question is not whether or not she has the power to create it. The question is what it costs to live in it. Because before reality begins to bend, there is always a moment that breaks it. Before the power, before the reality itself begins to bend, before the world ever starts shifting around her. Wanda Maximoff was a child in a place that did not offer stability as a guarantee. Sokovia was not defined by peace or safety. It was shaped by conflict, by uncertainty, by a tension that truly never disappears. Even in moments that seemed quiet on the surface, and in that kind of environment, loss does not always arrive as a sudden shock. Sometimes it lingers in the background, waiting for the moment it finally takes something from you. For Wanda, that moment came early. A single night, a single explosion, the kind of event that does not just take something away, but changes the way you understand everything that follows. Her parents were gone in an instant, but what remained was not just absence. It was a question that never truly settles. Why? That question does not fade. It grows. It reshapes itself over time, becoming something you carry without realizing it, something that quietly influences the way you think, the way you react, the way you see the world. And for Wanda, it did more than stay in the background. It became part of her. Because in the aftermath, there was another moment, not one defined by loss alone, but by something just as lasting. Waiting, trapped, helpless, staring at something that could have taken her life at any second, knowing there was nothing she could do about it. And that kind of experience changes you. It teaches you what it means to have no control. And once you understand that feeling, once you know what it is like to have everything decided for you, every moment dictated by something outside your reach, you do not forget it. You carry it forward. You build around it. You search for something, anything that ensures you never have to feel that way again. Because loss is one thing, but helplessness is something else entirely. And that becomes the foundation, not just for who Wanda is, but for what she becomes. Because when someone grows up surrounded by instability, shaped by loss, and defined by moments where they had no control, the desire to change that is not just understandable, it is inevitable. Thanos. And that is where her story truly begins. Not with power, not with revenge, but with a quiet, growing need to make sure the world can never take something from her like that again. Because when control is taken away from you early, you do not just learn to survive without it, you learn to want it back. The need for control does not stay abstract. It does not remain a quiet thought or a distant desire. It looks for a direction. It looks for something to attach itself to, something that can give you a purpose and shape. For Wanda Maximoff, that direction came in the form of something that did not promise healing or peace, but felt close enough to be convincing. Hydra did not approach her as the enemy. They approached her as an answer. Because when someone has lived through loss like that, when they have experienced helplessness in a way that reshapes how they see the world, they are not searching for comfort. They are searching for meaning, for something that explains why it happened, for something that makes the chaos feel structured, the pain feel purposeful. And Hydra gave them that. A reason for what happened, a system to blame, a structure that turned random tragedy into something that felt intentional, something that could be understood, something that could be fought. And once that belief takes hold, once it settles in as something that feels real, it becomes easier to accept what comes next. Because the experiments were never presented as a risk. They were presented as an opportunity. A way to take everything made her vulnerable and turn it into something else. Something stronger. Something untouchable. Something that can never be controlled like the way she once was. And that is where the shift begins to take shape. Because power, in this context, is not about ability. It is about protection. It is about the belief that if you are becoming strong enough, you gain enough control. If you understand the world in the way that others do not, then nothing can ever take something from you again. That you can prevent the kind of loss that defined your past. That you can rewrite the outcome before it ever happens. But that belief comes with a cost. Because the more you rely on power to create stability, the more it begins to change you and how you saw everything around you. The world stops being something you exist within and starts becoming something you evaluate, something you measure, something you believe can be fixed, corrected, and reshaped. And that is where the justification takes hold. Because if the world is broken, then changing it does not feel wrong. It feels necessary. And if you have the power to do it, if you are the one capable of making those changes, then it becomes easier to believe that maybe you are meant to. That maybe what you are doing is not crossing a line, but fulfilling a purpose. That is logic. That is the shift. And it does not feel extreme when it happens. It feels like progression, like growth, like stepping into something that finally makes sense after a lifetime of confusion and loss. Because for the first time, Wanda is not reacting to the world around her. She is beginning to believe she can shape it. And once that belief settles in, once it becomes something she holds, the line between what it is and what could be are starting to blur. Because once you believe the world can be changed, the next question is not whether you should. It is how far you are willing to go to do it. Power does not resolve grief. It delays it. For Wanda Maximoff, everything she gained did not replace what she lost. It did not fill the absence. It did not quiet the question that had followed her since the beginning. It only gave her the ability to keep moving, to keep fighting, to keep believing that somewhere ahead there was something that would finally make sense of everything she had been through. And for a time, that belief held. Because in the middle of everything else, she found something that felt stable, something that did not come from loss or conflict or control. She found connection. She found someone who understood her in a way that no one else had. And for the first time, the world did not feel like something she had to fight against. It felt like something she could exist in. But that did not last. Because the pattern does not change, the loss returns. And this time, it takes something that mattered just as much. Vision was not someone just in her life. He was proof. Proof that something good could come from everything else she had endured. Proof that she could have something that was not defined by pain, not shaped by loss, not built on survival alone. And when that is taken away, the grief does not feel new. It feels familiar, but deeper, heavier, more final, because this time she understands exactly what it is meant to lose it, and she understands what comes after, and that understanding does not strengthen her. It breaks something. Not all at once, not violently, but quietly. Because grief does not always explode. Sometimes it builds. It settles in, reshaping everything around it until the world itself no longer feels like something you can exist in the way that you once did. The edges change. The meaning shifts. The reality you knew begins to feel incompatible with what you feel inside. And that is where the descent begins. Not into chaos, but into something far more controlled than that. Because Wanda does not lash out. She does not lose herself in destruction. She creates something. A place where the loss never happened. A world where everything remained intact. Where the pain is gone. Where the question that has followed her for so long no longer needs to be answered. Westview is no accident. It is not a mistake. It is a response. A controlled, intentional reality built around a single purpose. To hold on to something that was never meant to last. And that is what makes this different. Because this is not someone losing control. This is someone taking it back completely. And once that happens, once the world begins to bend that need, the line between reality and what she wants it to be stops existing altogether. Because when your grief becomes reality, it does not just affect you. It changes everything around you. What Wanda Maximoff creates does not stay contained. It cannot. Because a world built from grief does not exist in isolation. It reaches outward, extending beyond her own experience, pulling others into it, and reshaping not just her reality, but theirs as well. Westview looks perfect on the surface. Orderly, peaceful, controlled. A place where nothing appears to be missing, where nothing feels broken, where every moment follows a pattern that makes sense. It presents itself as stability, as harmony, as something whole. But that sense of perfection comes at a cost. Because the people inside it are not part of the creation. They are part of the structure. Every movement, every word, every expression tied to something they did not choose. Their lives reshaped into something that serves a purpose that is not their own. Their autonomy replaced with something quieter, something controlled. And that is where the weight of this begins to settle. Because Wanda is not completely unaware. There are moments where the illusion fractures, where the control slips just enough to reveal what lies beneath. Moments where the reality she built cannot fully hide the truth of what it is. And in those moments, something returns. Not a question of why this has happened, but what it means that she allows it to continue. Because control, when taken this far, stops being protection. It becomes something else entirely. Something that from the outside looks very different than it does within. To the people inside Westview, this is not safety. It is confinement. It is a loss of autonomy, a quiet, constant awareness that something is wrong without the ability to change it or escape it. And that is where the perception begins to shift, where the reality Wanda sees and the reality the others experience is no longer aligned. Because Wanda does not see herself as a villain. She does not believe in causing harm in the way others might define it. She sees someone holding on to something that was taken from her. Someone creating a space where the pain cannot reach, where the loss does not exist. But intention does not erase consequence. And the longer that reality holds, the harder it becomes to separate what she feels from what others are enduring, because the cost of that world is not measured by what she gains. It is measured by what everyone else feels. And once that becomes clear, once the illusion can no longer be fully contained, the question is no longer whether she can maintain control. It is whether she is willing to let go. And that is where everything comes together. Because this was not just about grief. It was about what happens when someone has the power to make grief disappear and chooses not to. So where does that leave us? Because this story does not end with victory. It does not resolve in a way that feels complete or clean. There is no moment where everything that was broken is neatly put back together. What remains is something far less certain. A choice. Because everything Wanda Maximoff becomes is rooted in something deeply human. Loss. Grief. The kind of pain that certainly does not fade, no matter how much the time passes. For most people, that pain stays internal. Something you carry. Something you learn to live with, even when it never truly leaves. But Wanda does not just carry it. She has the ability to change it, to reshape the world in a way that removes it entirely. And when that line begins to blur, because if you had that ability, if you could create a reality where the people you lost were still there, where the pain never happened, where everything felt whole again, would you use it? Or would you accept what was taken from you? That is not an easy question, because what she creates is not built from malice. It is built from longing, from the need to hold on to something that was never meant to last. And that's what makes it harder to define, harder to separate it into something as simple as right or wrong. Because this is not someone seeking revenge. It is someone refusing to let go. But in holding on to that reality, she takes something from the others, their choice, their autonomy, their ability to exist outside of what she has created. And that is where the weight of it settles, where intention and consequence begin to move in opposite directions. Because even if the intention is not harm, the impact still does. So is this madness? A loss of perspective where the need to escape pain overrides everything else? Or is it something else? A form of justice turned inward, a refusal to accept the world that continues to take without giving anything back? And if that is the case, then where does that leave the line? Because when grief is strong enough to reshape reality, then there may not be one left at all. And this is where the line becomes the hardest to see. Because this was never about vengeance. It was never about justice. It was about grief. The kind that does not fade. The kind that does not loosen its hold. The kind that makes you question whether moving forward is even possible. And when someone is given the power to escape that, to build where the pain no longer exists, the question is not whether they should use it. It is whether they can let go. Because Wanda does something that feels impossible. She chooses to stop. She lets it all collapse. She allows the illusion to fade. She chooses to lose everything again, fully aware of what that means. And that choice matters. Because it proves something that cannot be ignored. that even with all that power, even with every reason to hold on to, she did not fully lose herself. But the question remains, if you had the power to create a world where your pain never happened, would you walk away from it? Or would you stay and let it become real? This has been Revenge and Madness.